So I really like history as a curiosity.
Mhm.
I play a lot of historical games, a lot of paradox games. I just basically half the videos I watch on YouTube or documentaries that I watch are history based. What for you makes history interesting to learn and study?
Mm, one one element of history that I like, it's more like an element of time perception than anything else. But it's the fact that right now when we think of history, we think of it as one continuous line that makes sense as a whole because it's like a succession of events.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but uh, when you think of it as the people who actually lived at that time, they were completely blind as to what was coming next, just in the same way as we are now. And so, if instead of looking at it as one continuous line of time, and instead of looking at it like that, you look at it as consecutive presence, then it kind of I feel like that idea is a bit mind blowing. Like the fact that um, when one person made a decision, you know, it kind of impacted so much afterwards, and they had no idea how. And the fact that they were completely blind, but we have this bird's eye view of history.
Yeah, there's this
It's
Steve Jobs quote that you can't connect the lines going forwards, but you can definitely connect them going backwards, and
yeah,
that's exactly.
yeah, true.
I'm really curious about how much we have missed and lost. You know, the historical events, the people, the macro and the micro of what we've lost.
Hmm.
But in general, there are things that I think history is the most humbling subject there is.
Sure.
Outside of maybe, physics, even no, even because you gotta have a foundation of physics to understand how the universe works and how massive it is. That already in itself is humbling.
Yeah.
But then you, as an individual human, with history, you learn. Okay, you as an individual human, however we happen to be this small thing in this massive, massive universe. There was what, like 108 billion of us.
Mm.
8 billion are still alive, and each of us make decisions, and then at some point there are a few that get remembered throughout history because they had such a massive impact in either raising the productivity or reshifting how the politics work. It's really fucking humbling.
But yeah, and if you think about all those people that we don't remember because they weren't documented, they weren't recorded, um, and the stories weren't told about them. Like, it's 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 absolutely certain that there were some incredible people in there,
Of course.
and I would have I often like to think about myself having conversations with people from certain time periods, and I think that's very interesting to kind of simulate how that would pan out. Um, and yeah, yeah, that's it. That's it. Really, I just, I think in general, I'm a bit more interested in how people lived at a certain time more than what makes a certain time interesting. Like what big thing happened at that time. Like I'm not that interested in like the huge events.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not as interested as the idea of World War II and the dates and the blah blah blah.
Which is
More
exactly what
than
we learn in school.
yeah,
We just learn the dates and the main
exactly,
causes
which
of
I
war.
don't find
Yeah,
very
same.
interesting. I want to know how did they live? Like, um, how did they think? What was the general mindset at the time? What what was valued? What wasn't valued? You know, like that's more interesting to me.
Have you heard Hardcore History by Dan Carlin?
Mm-mm.
So he has this series. So basically, just as an intro for those who don't know, is each episode is about 4 to 5 hours long,
Mm-hmm.
3 to 5 hours, let's say, long, and he goes in as much depth as he can possibly go into. And I think he did a 6-part series on World War One. Each episode again 4 or 5 hours long. It's basically a book, and he goes into insane detail from using quotes from letters that random soldiers wrote to the generals, to the high-level leaders. You really, instead of memorizing, and I remember in year 10 in British schools, like, oh yeah, what were the 5 main causes of World War One? Nationalism, blah 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 blah.
Mm.
You actually get to hear from first-hand experience how it sounded like when the biggest cannon at the time was fired towards you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's fucking amazing about history.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I mean, I wouldn't have the patience to sit through 4 or 5 hours of that. But what I do appreciate about that is that you don't remember one single thing. Maybe you might remember a few specific things, but you remember like a general impression. You have an impression of how things were at that time,
Which is absolute horror.
and but that's what I would want.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if there was a way of condensing getting an impression of something from 4 or 5 hours to like 5 or 10 minutes, I would totally be in. I would just absorb that stuff. I would love it.
We talked about history and we talked about values, although I kind of want to go deeper into that in a bit.
Yeah.
One person who has kind of become very famous on the well, not kind of, he's become very famous on the internet for his stances, well, for his very in-depth interest in history and also his stances on morals and values that our society is going in, is Jordan Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of haters, a lot of lovers.
Mm-hmm.
I found out that you happen to also enjoy a lot of his work.
Yeah.
What attracted you to Peterson's work, first of all?
I think, okay. So he just popped up onto my YouTube like 2 years ago or something,
Mm-hmm.
and I watched one of his videos, and I found that so he's very precise in the terms he uses and the information he uses, and he has very reliable information, and he makes a point of not being biased by defensive opinions. He's not biased by emotion. Like, he has no personal agenda in any of like what he says. He's just it feels like he's objective and he's neutral about it. And I appreciate that, because I don't want anyone to be telling me stuff just because like they personally believe in it or something. Like, I want something impartial, you know? And so one of the things that he's debated many times across his videos is feminism. And I mean, I know that it's for many a pretty touchy subject, so I don't want to throw myself into it right now. But